Hi everybody, Siegfried Trent from Debate Dojo here. Today we're going to be talking about the audience for your debate. So whenever you're going to be engaged in a debate, one of the important things that you need to do is figure out who your target audience is. That is, who you are trying to persuade. You might think that that's always going to be your opponent, but in fact, that's only very rarely the case. Usually your opponent is more sort of a foil that you're going to be working against, but you will not be persuading them. They're going to be dedicated to trying and opposing whatever you're saying. So there's a number of different audiences that you could consider, and it really depends on the situation you're in and what your goals in the debate are. So let's talk about a few of those. For starters, we've got competition debates where you're going to be targeting judges of the debate, whoever it is that is going to decide who wins and who loses. For this, it's important to understand the conventions and rules surrounding the type of debate that you're engaged in. If you have professional judges who are skilled in that form of debate, it's really important that you have structure and clarity in your arguments because they're going to try to be as neutral as possible, not to use their own biases or emotional appeals. They're going to be sticking to logic. It's also important in these kind of debates, even though you have an opponent, that you're going to want to address the judges and your audience directly instead of your opponent. So you would say things like, today's debate, you're going to need to make the following decision under the following criteria. And as you can see, I've clearly demonstrated to you that blah, 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 blah. So you're not going to be directing towards your opponent. Usually you will refer to your opponent in third person. My opponent says the following. I say the following. This is very useful because you're going to appear to be more reasonable and less combative, and you're going to be speaking directly to the audience that you're trying to persuade, which is more powerful. Now, in many situations, you're going to be debating or arguing for decision makers. This is something that would happen at work quite often, but in other social groups that you're in, you're going to want to try to influence whoever is going to make a decision in order to decide in your favor. In these cases, it's important to set your ego aside, and you're going to be arguing from the viewpoint of the decision maker. So you want to get inside their head, understand what their motivations and their desires are, and you're going to want to pitch your argument such that the decision that you're trying to have be the outcome is going to be something appealing to the decision maker and their goals and objectives. Likewise, when you're talking, you shouldn't speak from a self-centered point of view, saying, well, I think this is best, this is the smartest thing, so on and so forth. You're going to want to say, this decision would help you achieve X, Y, and Z. This action is going to be great for our company or our mission or our team, that kind of thing. So you want to take it away from you. It's not your idea. It's going to become the idea of the decision maker. It's going to be their action. They're going to be held responsible for it. So you want to pitch it from their point of view. You're going to be a lot more effective that way. If you're combating with somebody else who has other ideas, it's important in these situations not to be overly critical because generally speaking, you're all part of the same team. So you're going to want to have an environment that says, we're all working together, but this is the decision that is best going to meet the objectives of the organization or the decision maker in this case. If you're in a private debate, which does happen, where you have no audience at all, obviously you're going to be trying to persuade the person that you're talking with in some fashion. These can be especially difficult because whenever people are engaged in a debate or argument, there is an automatic defense mechanism that kicks in. We all want to be right, and so we're going to be very resistant to new ideas, and we see our role in the debate as opposing what the other person is saying. So in these kind of debates, if you want to be persuasive, you need to undermine these challenging oppositional roles. You want to be engaged in a discussion where both sides are working towards a common understanding, have a shared goal, and are working towards a common position, or to be able to see eye to eye on at least some areas. One of the important techniques in order to do that is to try and establish a set of shared values between you and the person you're debating with. A goal or a principle or a moral belief that you can share in common. Then you can use that as a framework to build off on to try and show how the position that you're representing represents and upholds those values. That's going to give your opponent a lot more ground to come across and to look from your point of view and to understand how things are going. The other thing to keep in mind is you're not going to usually be able to get somebody to agree on the spot. It's going to be a lot more effective to plant the seeds of change, to give them an idea of a new perspective that they can then internalize, take upon themselves, and in the fullness of time, perhaps modify their views and come around to that point. But it has to be something that you're not forcing it on them or pushing it towards them, because that's going to engage those defensive mechanisms. You're going to put up some walls and barriers to those ideas. You simply want to present them as possible ideas, interesting ideas that they may not have considered, ideas that you hold valuable and you think are important, but you don't want to show those as opposite to what they're thinking. So in this way, you're gonna kind of pull them. You can't make them drink the water. You can lead them to the water, but you can't make them drink. They have to make that decision on your own. So don't make that a fight. Make it a cooperative process. All right. Now, what about audiences? So a lot of the time, even when you're on Facebook, if you're arguing with someone else, like I said, you're in these defensive situations, and it's less likely you're going to persuade that person. But there's usually a lot of other people reading. So you should consider on whether or not you want to influence these other people or the person you're talking to. And I would argue, generally speaking, you're going to want to influence other people. Same as if, if you're giving a big presentation debate. You're probably not going to like have an effect on the other team particularly, but there's going to be people in that audience that you want to reach. Now, again, even amongst a broader audience, there's really kind of three groups that you can be targeting, and you really want to think about that. There are friendly people who already generally agree with your position. There are hostile people who have an antithetical view, or at least are favorable to the opposing side of the argument. And then you're going to have people who are genuinely undecided in some fashion. They may lean one way or the other, but they explicitly have an open mind on the issue that you're debating. So each of these audiences requires or benefits from a different kind of technique. So for the friendly audience, you might think, why would I debate to try and convince a friendly audience? It's actually really common. Politicians do this all the time. When they go up and they give a political speech, they're not really going to think they're going to get people from the other party to agree with them. That just isn't very likely. They are interested in getting to the people who are undecided, but they're really most interested in representing to their base, to the people who would be their allies, that they are strong, strident, powerful, and effective communicators for the position that those people already believe in, because that's the kind of support you really need to win an election. So a lot of the time when you are arguing the audience, you're really actually just trying to portray your ability to deliver the message that people already believe in. This is also true if you're going on a book tour or something, and you're on a debate show, but you're really promoting your book. Are you going to get people who hate your guts and think your view is totally wrong to go out and buy your book? Probably not. But if you can do a good case for presenting your side, the people who generally in support of you are going to go out and buy your book. So presenting a strident argument that probably has no appeal to the other side whatsoever may be your best bet in those kinds of situations. So that's why you really need to think about who you're targeting and what you want them to do. Now, if you are trying to go for a hostile audience, then what you really need to do is try and, again, like arguing one-on-one, diffuse that hostility in some way. Find common values or underlying philosophies that they hold that you find value in and you can connect on and make your message known. So if you're arguing a political point, look to a value that the other side holds dear and show how your motivations are really the same as their motivations, but you have a different reason for thinking a particular action will be effective, and then you can talk about how and why, what proof you have that it will be more effective in achieving those values and aims that they hold dear. And if nothing else, you can try to portray yourself as, well, perhaps I'm a person who they don't agree with on a particular policy, but they can respect my viewpoints because I understand where they're coming from and we have shared values, even if we have different means to achieve them. That's going to move people a little closer, make them more receptive to listening to what you have to say. Finally, you've got your undecided audience, which for many debaters is the ideal. These are people who they fall into two camps. In one case, they might be people who haven't thought about the message very deeply. In the other case, they might be people who have studied it very carefully but haven't made a decision. So they're usually people with very little knowledge of the subject or people with a whole lot of knowledge of the subject from all kinds of points of view. Generally speaking, you can use both an emotional appeal and a charismatic appeal, as well as a logical and principled and evidence-based appeal to get to people like these. And you really want to do both. And the most important thing, because these are people who sit in the middle, you don't want to appear to be too strident in one way or unconfident or wishy-washy about your views. You want to be confident in order to lead these people who are undecided over to your side, but you also want to appear reasonable and reasoned so that they don't think you're just an ideologue or a demagogue, which is the kind of people that they undecided folks tend to turn off and tune out. So there you go. Whenever you're going to engage a debate, ask yourself, who is my audience and how can I best reach them? And you should do well.